eventually, after a little tiny excursion into the fall of Rome, spelled differently. Yeah, I got to get the SPI one out and try that too. There's another solitaire game, just slightly later era. We took care of the status and aging, and we had a couple of new kingdoms forming. The Visigoths down in Hispania, which is great, and the Alani up in Italy, which is not so great. Not where they want to be. And there's a victory point issue to that, but also hey, I really want to get down to Hispania. And I still want to. That's where all my victory points are. So, like, I'm going to probably try to move down there and lose that province, without being subjugated. That's the problem. That's the hard part. The other dangerous one was the Heruli. They were in kind of a crappy position. There's special rules for this. No city, and had they transitioned, it would be kind of not a good thing. They'd be running pretty much just off the $20 bonus that they get for becoming a kingdom. At the same time, the Persians and Britons are eating through victory points, 5 each, for slamming up against the end and not having an empire. And, I mean, they're just going to become point sinks. I thought that the Gepidai might be turning into an empire. You need 3 areas, but that's 3 civilized areas, so it's kind of like the Hunnish thing. I got to get one more area before there's a risk to it. And then it's just a die roll. I don't have a choice in the matter. So in a way, it's kind of cool to play things out, but they're the most potent in terms of total number of areas. The Vandals, probably giving them a run for their money in terms of total cash. Yeah, okay. What else? We have, oh, I forgot to give a city increase, I think, for either of these, which I've got to give them. Hold on. An unfortunate thing for the Visigoths, their city growth had to come in Tuscany. It was the only blank area that they controlled. They probably should have set themselves up better instead of grabbing just this, throw themselves into Baetica or something. Make sure they got a city and their city growth there where they want to be. Because all the cities are already founded, so they don't get just a freebie. They get just a freebie because they were stuck back here, unable to get out of there. The Alani end up making Pavia, not Pavis, into an even larger city, which is kind of a cool situation. And I don't remember where we are. I don't think there are any heresies, so now I follow the reinforcement book and figure out what's happening this turn. It doesn't look like much. I got counters to show me what's coming in. Fun? Wait a minute, we got something weird here. Okay, so I think there's some sort of special rule which doesn't exist. Apparently, so what we have is the Scots coming in. And my first thought was, they start here, even as a kingdom, they don't have any boats. How are they going to do shit? Well, they have something here, invasion straits to Dalriata and Galovidia. I don't know of any special rules that handle this. This may be the only place it's at all mentioned, but my guess is that they can move into there. Now, they're interested in creating a kingdom in Caledonia, Hibernia. I'm not sure that they can ever go back and forth after they get there, so they may want to establish themselves in at least enough of Ireland that they can create that they can get ownership of the of the area. I don't know if they keep those straits open. I don't see any indication that they do. I don't see any indication that they get any special forces. So, I mean, you know, historically, yeah, they pretty much moved to Scotland, but that may not be their best choice. I don't know. We'll have to look at what their points are for. Caledonia. All provinces of Caledonia, yeah. So, to get all provinces of Caledonia, Hibernia, they're going to have to keep some units here. And keep a presence in Ireland, which will never be able to reinforce them. They can build stuff there if they keep a unit there. But, yeah, so, it's going to be kind of weird. Other than that, I'm trying to think what I'm doing. I get the feeling there was something weird going on. Oh yeah, the Angles stuck up here, unable to get to where they want to go because their boat was sunk. Other barbarians showing up, you know, like the Lombards and such, not those countries that are still barbarians are generating their forces. And there's still Hunnic reinforcements, even though it is impossible for the Huns, according to the rules, to be barbarians, hence getting reinforcements. They have reinforcement units at this point in the game. Starting on turn 5 or whatever, on their turn on turn 5, they either dissolve or turn into a kingdom. They can never turn to a barbarian, yet here we are on turn 8, and they're still programmed, and it's sort of the default, but it's specifically programmed for the Huns, where it's saying they get one unit and a named king. Great. I have no idea, you know, what this is supposed to represent, what the rule that makes them dissolve is supposed to be about, any of this, like, whatever. And for the Byzantines, not only do we have Justinian, but we have Belisarius and Narcissus. Kind of killer combination. And that works kind of nicely because the way campaigns work, obviously Justinian's not going to get a campaign, but Belisarius can launch a campaign in Italy. Once he fails or whatever, then you can swap Narcissus in, which gives you that kind of historical aspect where Narcissus can complete the conquest of Rome. So where are we here? We did reinforcements. We're going to be on events, and I am really crapped out. It's funny because I kind of am just used to, hey, whatever video I'm talking on, I tell about my life story or whatever. Over in Fall of Rome, I talked about the fact that I'm crapped out and didn't do anything yesterday game-wise, and today I'm having trouble because I'm trying to clean my fucking roof. And if you want the whole story, it's on that little video. There's probably as much story as there is game. Alright, yeah, I'm gonna go rest. I thought I could get more forward because it is still kind of early, but I'm tired. Okay, so we played the event phase. Everybody got a hold event. Some of these hands are getting kind of big. I'm finding myself less and less willing to cope with them. It's sort of a matter of maybe I check them every now and then, like, oh, is there something that can save me? You know. But yeah, for the most part, I'm completely kind of ignoring that side of things. Diplomacy is similar. I'll get to that in a moment. Raids, we had only one raider active who's left. The Arabs shifted from here up to here, got themselves 3 victory points. So the events, I understand what they could add to the game. You know, it's just, at this point, I'm so unfamiliar with playing the game that it's very, very hard to cope with that kind of mechanism. It's not an unfamiliar mechanism, The counters certainly make it worse, as I've expressed. But I gotta say, eventually I could see them entering their own in the game. I would almost suggest damn near throwing them out. Um, just to reduce the effort in trying to play the game. And I'm finding it easier not to cope with that kind of crap. Caravan ended up way back at Reggae again, gave those Hephistopheles, I don't know what the hell they're called, a little bit extra money. They succeeded this time. And then Diplomacy, similar to the raids, piles of cards. I find them pretty fucking useless again. In particular, the Britons got a Fetus card. I could offer a Fetus to one of these. Actually, could I? Yeah, see, the problem is I would have to give up 2 of my provinces. That weakens my kingdom so much. It's really not an easy thing for a kingdom to do. So, it's a buck in the bank at the end of the turn, which I certainly will need, but I'll probably be, bleeding points before anything happens due to an almost assured bankruptcy. In fact, it is an assured bankruptcy. Brilliant setup to have done that, but that was my Arthur turn. I needed to go out and get stuff, I guess. I don't know. I like the random events. They add something to the game without adding any burden. So, getting rid of events entirely may be kind of goofy. And in fact, maybe they're the only way that this counter flips over or something. Or maybe not. Don't know. Let me think what else we got here. Okay. So for the Diplomacy, I actually did think about playing an alliance with the Franks to ally to the Suebi. If the Suebi had gotten it, they definitely would have tried. But here's the thing. So I'd love to get the Suebi out of me because they're preventing me from controlling the area. Yes, I've got them subjugated. But other than for victory points, they're kind of a bone. I'd still have to kill a couple. I'd have to get rid of the Alemanni too, and I'd have to kill the Burgundians. So enticing them to leave in the hopes that maybe I can get their city somehow, a city which doesn't do me much good, doesn't really hurt me. And the Suebi could leave as long as they don't attack Frankish territory. So there's no real advantage to that. The only advantage to getting the Suebi there is we could kind of share victory points in an attack or something. I could make it easier for them to leave by giving them a chance to attack something. And I don't know that that's terribly in my best interests either. Justinian here has tons of cards. He got 3. He gets a lot of those too. It's kind of funny. Some of the cards are this brownish color as though they're play-only events, or play immediately events, but they're not on the other side. And the same thing with the Diplomacy, I think. Some of the cards are, well, you can see it here. Some of the cards are printed with a different color for no apparent reason, just, he also has an alliance card, a graft card, which is like an event card in that, I can screw with a siege and I won't remember. And then the mercenary, which I do tend to actually look at. Spend a few extra bucks, get something from someone. I'm, again, finding it's hard to make that a worthwhile task, but it might be of value to grab something from someone that I'm not going to attack, but that I'm going to but near someone I'm going to attack, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe to clear a space. I can't see too much use for it, but giving the money up isn't that big a deal usually. The thing is, I think they get to choose which unit to give you, so unless they only have good units left, you're just going to get an infantry out of it, which isn't really that great. It's just a casualty. That's going to put us to the administrative phase. This is the hard part. See, the problem is I woke up, had the debate on to sleep, and it woke me up, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty awake. I could get a little bit done, but I don't think I want to go dive into the admin phase too much. But yeah, oh, there was something else that was the raiders. So the raiders are kind of similar to the thing I'm talking about with the events and the diplomacy, although they're even more, why am I bothering, right? Okay, so yes, the history involved raiders coming in, hitting stuff. They're a source of victory points. They might serve some kind of balancing mechanism in the game, although again, I don't think the victory points mean much. Yeah, they're how you win, but who cares about that? They just don't, it doesn't seem to be a balanced game. But, and they might show up somewhere and create some kind of mess somewhere. I mean, like I had the angles up there, although I don't think that was from that. But, yeah, I've got like this guy here. He's unimportant, you know. As a mechanism, they're not showing much of interest in terms of the story of the game. Kind of like these guys, although these guys, who I illegally moved forward, or maybe didn't, you know, because I'm not sure how they, I mean, they are subjugated. They should move along, and that's the only way they moved. Yeah, they provided a little bit of a barrier. It's kind of like this, but you know, it's just such a minor thing to add these little bits of raiders or something to the board. They complicate things a little bit, but I just don't feel like they add much to the game. They could have been done as just a simple, hey, a new kingdom shows up, you know, or a new something shows up. Who knows what the hell it is, you know? Because it doesn't have a king, but it's an inactive something there that doesn't gain you any victory points or anything. So what are you doing with it? Well, I don't know. But yeah, it again feels like a little bit of Chrome that's going on, and you know, if the game was really devoid of Chrome, a couple of the something like that might help a little bit. But the game is so much Chrome and so many special case rules and everything that I just throw my hands up in the air and say, Jesus, I don't know. It feels like, you know, there was this, we threw the kitchen sink in. How about some mold underneath it? I mean, it's just this random shit thrown in here that, yeah, it happened, but it has almost no impact on the game. At some point or another, there has to be a decision of, yeah, we don't really need this. We don't really need to spend on counter mix for these. We could use that extra counter mix to put something in like little control flags, which would be fucking amazing. Oldest of the extant kingdoms is Persia. They had no money left, so they have to pay for a card. Boom, they're bankrupt. They've already gone bankrupt once. They've already aged once at maximum age and decline level and lost 5 victory points off that. They lose 5 more victory points off the bankruptcy. You can only go bankrupt once per turn in terms of like penalties. So now they've lost 10 victory points already. Okay. Their leader is lost. They get another age. That's a 15th victory point that they've lost this turn. And you can see why, you know, it's just horrible to have a kingdom at maximum age. My thoughts had been these things would start disappearing. No, they hose you completely. There's no way to get rid of them. Which, much, much worse than anything that happens in Britannia-style games in terms of what you're screwed with. Now I've got a usurper I've got to deal with. But then I'm going to make an income, and right now I looked at my income, and it's like $15 minus 10 for this. So I'm looking at about $5. I'm going to suffer another bankruptcy and lose most of my units. That bankruptcy will not cost me any victory points, though, so at least there's that. Usurper may, though. I seem to remember that that can cause you to age. So we beat back the usurper, which means we lost one unit. We can't lose one of these. Now, this is one thing that's kind of weird. So this says, game turn is momentarily stopped to solve the usurper's action. Oh, it's after the admin phase. Okay, so I actually take the other effects into play first, which is painful because that means I have to pay for units. Oh well. I ended up in a situation where I succeeded in surviving or whatever. Had I failed, what happens here? I would have lost another 5 victory points. Yeah, so it's a good thing that I would be surviving it. I screwed up the timing, which is important, because I could actually lose one of these units and thereby lose the province because I'll be getting the money for the province first. I didn't realize, I thought this card said play immediately because of the way it says play immediately, but I don't read whole things, and momentarily stopped, but it happens after the rest of the admin phase for that country. Kind of screwed up about that is I can now build a unit to take that loss. Now obviously I don't know what's going on specifically, and I don't really want to lose a city, so I'm going to just leave things as they are. I actually have plenty of money to pay for things. I have $12. I must pay for all my units, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, make it 5 units. So I got $7 left. That's almost enough I can buy something else, but I should be able to avoid a bankruptcy next turn, and screw it, we'll just stay like this. Not $12, not 7 left, $2. That means I only get to keep 2 units, one of which is destroyed, so I'm down to 1 unit with no money left and another bankruptcy facing me, and there's nothing I can do about that. So I'm losing what's left of my kingdom, more or less. I like to complain. There's one thing I haven't complained enough about, and I really hate this model. The diplomacy and reform decks are tiny decks that require lots of reshuffling. The diplomacy deck, it's once per turn. You know, I can get through about a turn a day when I'm cranking this game. It's more like 1 a week now, so I can kind of live with reshuffling that tiny deck every turn. The reform deck is once per civilized country, which means I'm reshuffling that tiny deck so many different times. I hate that. And I'm not sure that cards are terribly valuable on this. This is something where you gotta do a lot of looking in comparison. Yeah, chits wouldn't have been that horrible here compared to the events that are covered on there. I don't know. I don't see a way of handling those and putting events on pillages, but again, you know, the pain of those really makes me unhappy. But these I do need to use quite often. The lookup might be a little painful, but again, shuffling tiny decks is just fucking obnoxious. It's one of the things I hate about Gloomhaven, is you're shuffling these little decks of like 12 cards or something, And as far as I'm concerned, I handle those shuffles by rolling dice. I'm not doing that with this. I got to do too many in too quick a procession. Faced the same kind of situation as the Persians did. A little worse, actually. So they were at -5 for aging off the end of the track, at -5 more for a bankruptcy, -5 more for aging off the card, and -5 more for a decline marker that they couldn't satisfy. 20 points lost. And they have $1 left after they pay their troops. Again, just, you do not want these kingdoms. It was kind of the one place where I had this option, right? I was gaining 20 points a turn by slaughtering my troops against the Romans. Well, now I'm beginning to regret that, because the second half of the game, I'm going to be generating negative points throughout the rest of the game, and they're going to be high numbers of negatives. Yeah, I gained a fair amount of points against the Romans, but you know, maybe I could have kept them alive by not taking the last couple turns of that. The thing is, the only way to keep them alive is to move up to Empire. That is the only way that you can avoid taking this penalty. And I don't know if that would have been possible. So I may have made the right choice. With the Britons, nah, you're just fucked, man. They start out at a high age, and boom, it goes up so fast. Somewhat in contradiction to this, there's this disappearing nations rule. If a nation has disappeared, has no units of its own on the map, during its reinforcement, any one of its units controlled by another nation will be removed by that nation. So, you know, if you end up loaning units like this. However, there is no way to get rid of the capital or the horde. There's just no way. They submit. That's the problem here. There's a hint that maybe that's not what's meant. It's an eminently dissatisfying way to play the game, is watching yourself losing points for, you know, not just your own, but watching everybody losing points for all these kingdoms that are sitting around doing nothing. I mean, come on, there's got to be a more elegant way to do it. And there's a hint that this is not what's intended, but it sort of appears to be. You know, the subjugation rules do not allow you to get rid of kingdom. The one exception being the Huns, who of course have reinforcements that are plotted after they could no longer possibly want them. It really feels like the game was just not considered at all. Like maybe the designer never played it, which I wouldn't put past him. It would be very, like, other than Le Grand Guerre, it is very hard for me to say that this or EU could possibly have been played without saying, huh, there's something very wrong here. Le Grand Guerre, if you played the campaign, you would say there's something very wrong with a couple of features in the game. The naval rules, they definitely create a skewing of the game where the German Navy has just too much of a chance of just wiping out one Allied fleet after another. And more importantly than that, the attrition that you suffer in each year, basically, you know, or every 3 months or whatever, 3 months, the economic effect that you have doesn't get you anywhere near the troops that you should have on the board. The way I play, it is feasible that there are players who would not push as hard, who would give up, you know, who would basically, you couldn't be playing historically either, in terms of the amount of effort you have to put into an offensive. But a similar situation comes in Balance of Power, a game that's much, much better designed, where both sides basically outrun their production because it's always in somebody's advantage to push the war harder. You know, somebody is going to get an edge out of it. They're the ones who are going to fight harder, and they're the ones who are going to make sure that neither side recovers to the degree they need to. You know, and that's sort of the classic World War I concept, right? You know, bleed them on the West Front in terms of the Allies trying to bleed the Germans in order that we can give some respite over to the East Front. You know, and then the Germans more or less have to beat the Russians up, because if you leave them alone, they can gain stuff, but they're weak enough that you can pound the crap out of them. You could do an alternative type setup, but then the West Front allies would not fight, and the Germans would try to crush the French, and the Russians would launch attacks. That would largely hurt them, but I think that actually hurts the Central Powers more to try to follow that path in either of the games, in almost any World War I game. But where are we digressing here? I don't know. Just this sort of, it really doesn't feel like somebody could have played this game by these rules. Could they have had some other rule set in their head? Maybe. Is that rule set maybe going to ever come out? Well, if EU and La Grande Guerre are any real example, the answer is no. These were thrown over the fence. This one, someone, supposedly with Thibault's stamp of approval, has been making modifications. They've been cleaning up glaring errors. But I don't get the feeling that many people have played much of this and have gotten to these consequences and been like, this is just fucking ridiculous. The Franks, who look like they're doing pretty well, but they stupidly spent all their money. So they took a -5 hit. Terrible thing. But they needed all that money to kind of build themselves up, right? But they still don't have the whole province, I don't think. They may have partial control. They don't have these territories, that much we know. Okay, so I got a catastrophic fire. Now here's the problem. It says randomly select a level 2 or 3 city. You make a D2 check and it might get pillaged, or it might be permanently reduced by a level. So I don't know whether or not, and I guess I will, capitals should be included in this, and a special city like Rome, that I'm not absolutely certain that they actually can be impacted by one of the effects, the reduction. So let's take the examples. First of all, Rome. Rome has this 3 on it. What happens if it burns? Well, does it become a level 2 wall city? There's no other counter for Rome, or it's just disappear. Again, no special rules. Who knows? This says event 2, maybe. Nope, doesn't say anything more than the card does. What happens if it's a capital? Well, let's take a peek at a capital. Here's the Burgundian capital. It's a level 1 city with a +1 for the capital. I can't take the capital marker away. The capital marker makes whatever city is there automatically level 2. We got a problem there. Same thing with Byzantium. It's a level 3 city. That can't be taken away from it. On the other hand, a pillage marker could be placed, and maybe the city will just regrowth because it's capital or whatever, and I think that's what I'm going to do. But my first attempt was, well, let's just look for the cities that could actually be impacted by the card fully. Again, leave that up to the players to figure out it as they're playing. For the Franks, with their big income, controlling a province, ooh, yeah, I did give them their tribute. I had forgotten and had to catch up with Persia, for example. They get their $2. These guys only get $2 for what I've got subjugated, but I have a -5 for being in decline already. I netted $3. That means bankruptcy again next turn, unless something weird happens, like I pillage something or whatever and get some extra cash. Screwed up for the Franks. Their bankruptcy did not hit them as hard as I thought, and neither did the Alemanni one. I forgot about bankruptcy's rules. I'm just counting it because, I'm used to being up against the wall where it is. That's not the case. Kingdom in bankruptcy ages 2 spaces, increases decline, and gets an additional calamity. It's actually worse, but it means I get some victory points back for this turn for the Alemanni and for the Franks. Watching these older kingdoms that don't have much money just collapsing left and right, you can see the ages have all shot up. It's, you know, the ones that I spent money off of, hey, maybe the Franks could have saved themselves, right? The others, not so much. The Ostrogoths got out of it with one bankruptcy. I mean, only one affects you, but in terms of, I think that's about all they got, is they took the bankruptcy effect. And remember, that causes another calamity. Now I'm on the Swebi, who got through without a bankruptcy. They had a few bucks left over and got some luck, and they're actually positive right now in terms of cash because, you know, they're not in decline. Tiny kingdoms in decline suck, right? You know, hey, my income's $3. Look, I got a -5 for being in decline. Now it's now -10. Yay! You know, there's just no way you can dig yourself out of that hole. Even Persia and other kingdoms that are kind of large are struggling as their decline increases. They just become victory point penalties. And of course, if these things disappeared and didn't clutter up the board, other kingdoms could actually like start making more money, maybe. But it's hard, you know. It takes a lot of pieces to conquer an area fully in order to get the income, and there are areas that are kind of poor. So we're going to see like the Gepidae, what happens with them. They actually have a fair amount of money, not a huge amount, but a fair amount. So they should probably be able to survive, I think, this turn. But, you know, it's a close run thing. But yeah, the Swebi got away because they're not in decline yet. However, I have 11 bucks left. I have almost nothing. I have like 2 units. I could start trying to crunch my way through the Burgundians. I feel like I want to buy another unit. Yes, that puts me into the danger zone, right? If I drop from 11 down to the 5 to 10, well, to the 5 to 9 zone, now if I don't draw a passive card, I'm screwed, and passive cards suck. But I gotta make it to Hispania, I think. Like, there's this balance, you know. How long do I want to just sit here maybe not making any points? Or do I want to take a little bit more chance and maybe make a few more victory points to try to offset the ones I'm going to lose for trying to do anything? I'm going to collapse either way really quickly. These kingdoms can't survive. I'll just get away pretty easily. +1 to their age. Remember, these are the younger kingdoms, right? Not the newest ones, but the younger kingdoms that had a $10 bonus to their cash flow. Built up some more stuff. Plus, I have a lot of territory. I pulled in nearly $30 in income. Now, I had to pay for a $10 card and then build some units and maintain my units. I ended up breaking about even, though, with an opportunity to try to clear up, capture more of Egypt, and maybe keep pushing eastward. I don't think I'm going to have as easy a chance making my way into Hispania unless the Visigoths fail, you know. But they're really young, so they just got a $20 influx. So they're, you know, they're not going away right away. It's these kingdoms that aren't getting free money that are just collapsing, you know. Persia starts off as a big thing. It's almost an empire. But these others, it's a hard move to make your way up. The only ones that have so far that have really succeeded, the Vandals, the Gepidae. The Ostrogoths came pretty close, but they're struggling. You can see they hit a decline already. Their age is getting up there. They're not in great shape anymore. The Gallic Romans, they of course went bankrupt multiple times essentially, so I get a disaster on them. So far, they have not cost any victory points, but they're screwed completely. They owe money they don't have. In tribute to someone, don't know who. I got a marker there. Damned if I know who. I don't know who stole there. Is that the Visigoths? Probably. Not a clue. Too bad they don't have control markers in this game, huh? Oh, look, I got a heresy, but this could be... Nope. doesn't affect me. Single area, or a single, single province, to tell you the truth. I am so fatigued by all this. I was going to move on to the Gepide. I got 3 more kingdoms to do and an empire, and I just can't cope. So depressing to just watch everything completely collapse. I mean, I used to make fun of and enjoy at the same time. Looking for it over there, Empires of the Middle Ages, which was a game where you kind of watched over this slow decline of your kingdom. In general, it would fail. Now and then you would get a good leader, and you could, increase your economic viability, and then you're not screwed anymore. Everybody was kind of decreasing at the same rate, but it didn't feel so fucking pointless. It wasn't like, oh look, now I'm just a city that's gonna lose me victory points every turn in the game for, that I have to record all this shit. I gotta go through this. I've got all these damn cards. I'm gonna draw cards for them, diplomacy cards. I have to run their economics and everything, and they're just gonna fail and fail and fail and cost me points. And it's just like, what a miserable experience this game is creating. I may end up looking at the rule book, the online living rules or whatever again, just to make sure that I'm not completely fucking something up. But honestly, I don't remember anything that touched on the subjugation rules, and they're what's at fault for this. It's the fact that kingdoms just won't disappear. The only thing that disappears are empires, because barbarians don't either. And then we got stupid shit like the Angles stuck over here, not where they want to be. No way of getting across, to tell you the truth. I don't think they could eventually create a kingdom and sail back to England. It's kind of like it's a much worse situation than you're facing with like the Allans, who are trying to make, or the Suebi, who are trying to make their way down to Hispania someday. But fuck, what a horrible mess this game is. It's like, it's got some pretty components. It's got some neat stuff going on. It just feels like it needs somebody to design it someday. Like the Vandals, the Gepide have themselves set up in a pretty nice position. Not quite Empire. Both of them are. Those are my stars right now, and both fairly young, still getting that extra influx of cash. Both of them have a good reserve, which has been the problem that I had before, is like forgetting to keep that reserve. It feels like a really stupid thing that you like have to keep money, and then you immediately generate the money after you pay for your card, and it's just like, geez, come on, But it is an interesting decision-making point, and events and actions within the turn can influence your cash. You could get hit by something that causes you to lose money. You could also find something that gives you cash by pillaging whatever. So I'm not going to gripe too much about that, but it does create this additional learning curve issue of, oh look, I fucked up completely. My kingdom is dead forever now because I made one error. That's pretty easy to make on a first play. And of course, I made it across a lot of kingdoms because now I've got a hard choice here. This is for the Visigoths, who are a new kingdom. They're fairly wealthy. I chose a military option because of that, and maybe made a mistake. This one would have just been a usurper, and I don't get my commander. But my commander's pretty good, except he's not on the board. Oops. Do we have a turn 8 commander? Huh. So why did I keep him on the board? Do I have Visigoths on here? I should. No, they're not listed. So, yeah, we're at the point where there are nations who just get a king, and I got to keep an eye out for that. Now I got to check. Sometimes the kings are printed differently, so, you got to pay attention to that, right? So I actually drew too many cards, but screw that, man. I'm not going to try to fix that issue, and I have to look. And now here's the problem. I've got two. I think these are both Visigoths. There's nothing else quite the same color until I get to the Avari. The nation isn't clearly represented on the counters. The colors sometimes are close enough together that at least I have to pull them under the light. I mean, for example, the Visigoths and the Angles. I can tell the difference, but I do really have to have it under the light to do so. Okay. Because there are so many colors in the game. And unlike EU, with its generally smaller counters or whatever, which provided something beyond just the color. There was a flag on the military units. There was a nationality written in a 2-letter code. There were more nationalities there, though, so the color mix was more problematic. But anyway, what ended up happening is I got a choice between two things. One that'll cost me some cash and cut my treasury in half. And I got a big treasury right now. They're both going to cost me 1 age. The other, though, is I might lose a couple of units at random, which could lose me stuff that's kind of interesting back here that I need for my economy because I have one province that is sort of, in my kingdom area. I haven't conquered Hispania or anything yet. So I don't know where I am. I really don't. And the poor hapless Alani had a lot of cash. They drew no passive cards, so they had to spend something big. And they spent it big on something that wasn't terribly good for them. It aged them great, but this inflation cut their money in half. They just ended up with, and they have a fair number of units, so they ended up with basically nothing left. They're headed for economic collapse, which of course is the death knell to even a young kingdom. They're very young. They'll be getting $10 extra next time, so that at least they have that in their place. And nothing to remind you that they're very young, like what year they became a kingdom or whatever. Again, you kind of have to keep track of all this shit on paper, or you could do something. I can't remember his name. It's like Mike Whitmore or something like that. He's the other guy who's doing videos of this recently in a lot more detail. He came up with kind of a play aid thing that allows you to track some very valuable information, and the idea of, hey, print some more counters and stuff like that. I didn't buy a print and play game. I don't mind making the play aid, but having to make a bunch of counters and everything, that's going a bit far for my taste. The biggest counter that would be useful, in my opinion, would have been control counters for the areas. And you could kind of do that with even, you still need a lot of counters, but some kind of like mini map as a play aid that just represents the areas and just show control markers in those so that it doesn't further clutter this already painful map. I did something similar to that with EU where I used colored pencils and stuff on the map, but just to like represent, hey, what's going on, whatever. I am too tired, or other issues, to do the Byzantines yet. Their economics has gotten simpler, not as simple as it was when it was just a changelog from turn one, but it's gotten simpler than it was a few turns ago. They're, in part because I'm tracking on here, so I can look things up, what territories they actually do control, and they've got like 4 areas under their control. I did want to touch on something before I hit to them, though, is like the economic decision oh, look, I fucked up and I went bankrupt because I built too many units and I just didn't understand the game. I didn't understand the consequences of the game until I've gotten to this point in the game, to tell you the truth. This is the first time when this kind of problem was happening. This is a spam phone call, I'm sure. But equally disturbing is this, I really don't necessarily, it's very important for kingdoms to become empires very quickly, or to at least have a lot of territory. That wasn't something that was obvious to me, but it's also kind of you have to have enough territory for the troops that you're going to have, etc. So like, Persia, the empires don't have to worry about maintenance. Persia starts off with a pretty good economy. Now I ran it into the toilet because I didn't understand that concept. But then also some of these other kingdoms happened where, hey, maybe I would have been better off losing units on the chance that I obtained more territory than, the situation some of them ran. Of course, the Franks are just kind of fucked for no reason. That was just the economic track thing. But, it's just, it's almost like this first game of it is worth nothing except to teach you things that should have been given to you in the rulebook, basically. There's a lot of examples and stuff. There's not a lot to give you the overview of the game. I felt similar issues with some of his other designs, especially with EU, where I'm kind of like, gee, if I had realized that, I would have done things differently. And then I realized, gee, the victory point system is so fucked up and wrong, and it doesn't give you a balanced game at all, that I guess it just doesn't matter. Just do whatever feels right. And that may be the case here, is screw it, I'm not playing to win the game. But within that, you're not just worried about the victory points here. You're worried about the fact that you're going to have to be managing this kingdom that can't do anything, that's just got like a capital on the board and is just constantly subjugation bait for other people, for whatever that matters. And again, I don't think this is the game that the designer intended to make. This is the one he wrote, as far as I can tell. One of the side effects of the fact that basically nothing disappears in this game is that you need an in decline marker for every civilized nation, essentially. And we've run out. There aren't very many in the game. I don't know what to use. I'll probably pull something out, but yeah, clearly there's not enough if kingdoms don't disappear. And right now the Byzantines have just gone into their first level of decline. And I don't know what to do, I mean, it's hard enough to understand the game state with the counters that are included in the game, and now I'm gonna, like with these, although those, honestly, I was using spare counters for the subjugation, because the actual subjugation counters, first of all, there's like 3 of them maybe, and there's tons of subjugation going on, but also they don't tell you whose they are, and the Romans had a lot of subject nations, so it made sense to give them special ones, and now it makes sense to do something else that I don't understand. Like where I've got this one, I don't know. I think that's only there because I'm out of counters, but I don't know. I don't, Although the perhaps only redeeming feature of this game is the components, even those aren't sufficient, to try and create the game that was intended here. Byzantines still have shitloads of money. I mean, not like they used to. They were up, at the beginning of the game, they were generating over $70. Now their total income comes to about 40, including, everything really. But that's enough for me to build all my units, to tell you the truth. All I have left are units that are from areas that I don't own anymore. And if I reconquer them, perhaps I can rebuild them or something. The way the rules are written, you're not limited that way. But I'm kind of fudging that over. And in fact, that might be an interesting idea, which is that if the Byzantines do re-expand, start allowing them to get like the Italian legions and stuff like that back. So that, you know, this Justinian reconquest of the West could serve a real purpose. But again, I don't know. You know. And let's see, we built another navy because we're feeling like the capability, we might be able to expand into the Adriatic, the capability to influence things in the West is becoming more and more important. We can't just shoot over to Hispania. We have to get a foothold in Italy to do so, because you have to have a port where your fleets are kind of based. So that's a big deal. Of course, the barbarian fleets, who the hell knows what they actually mean? Like, I feel like they need their own whole separate set of rules, and that the Jutes shouldn't have been able to sink the Angle fleet because, you know, yes, they could have fought each other, but they were kind of not involved in that kind of actions. What it should be is more something like whatever these special rules that apply to the Scots that give them a secret strait here that isn't on the map and seems to only last for this turn should have existed for the countries coming in or whatever. They shouldn't actually have to have fleets. Conceivably, Rome could sink their fleet. Now, does that make sense? Well, I don't know, maybe. But, you know, like if Rome was still present in northern Gaul, it would not be unreasonable that they would prevent the invasion. Historically, they were reducing it. Of course, the Britons also have a fleet, but they're so hosed just by like being a kingdom that was not very young to begin with, you know. Yes, they got the free money, but that's a couple of turns of pass. That's it. Okay. And I guess that's all I want to say, except that now we're ready to go into the actual play. And I can't wait till I'm done with this turn, because that means I get to play a different game again. This is like my bribe to get through this thing is every time I finish a turn, I'm going away and playing something else. It's funny, I babble for a while and I forget things that, you know, I babble about useless shit and then I forget things that I wanted to say. One of the things I wanted to hit on here was, remember, this game is meant to be expanded, right? It takes you to 650. Now, the Byzantine Empire is going to be in this tumbling, you know, it might make it through. It starts out as an empire. Empires are pretty strong. It starts out at age 1. But we're already hitting our first decline here. Our second decline is going to happen here, probably. We might hit collapse anytime in here very easily. I'm not saying that I object to that, because the Byzantine Empire did have issues. But whatever the follow-up game would be, has to have something in play that will allow them to rejuvenate greatly. Because you have to remember, the empire lasts until 1450, you know? Not the exact date, the decade. Yeah, I mean, you know, you got another 800 years of empire to take place. Now, how does it rejuvenate? How does it handle it? Well, the core system here does not allow for that. And in a way, that's kind of what I would have liked to see, is a game that, and I know this is the wrong designer to ask that from, but a game that genericizes the idea of, oh look, you know, there's a good chance that the Byzantine Empire would have failed in this period, but at any point, throughout any, you know, a leader could come who could rejuvenate it and make it almost a new thing. And honestly, I would rather have kingdoms disappear than just stay around and die. There's no question, or stay around and rot, basically. I would rather have the kingdoms disappear, but also have that kind of rejuvenation type thing. You know, Franks, they were rejuvenated in a period later than this, but they were rejuvenated by the Carolingian revival. You know, you have similar situations, I think, throughout in terms of long-lasting kingdoms. A lot of places just kind of collapse, and what do they turn into? Well, they turn into something else that may actually have ties to what, you know, what used to be there, if they're not driven out during their decay. So I just would much rather see something that explored something very different from what this game is actually trying to do. And again, it tries to do it by special cases. You know, I'm sure if there's going to be an extension to this, or maybe I didn't see anything there. There's a rejuvenation for Byzantines or something. Like there's the shit. The reintegration of the empire. Okay, I can't fucking find it now. Maybe it's only in the Roman book. Yeah, the Roman reunification. But there's nothing that's like a, you know, complete rejuvenation type event. And I would expect that, you know, that the follow-up game, if for any reason anybody thought this was playable enough to ask for a follow-up, I can't believe they built fucking expansions for it. You know, I mean, this is the Kickstarter problem, right? If this was published by a regular game company, it would have been put out, not by Kickstarter type operations. It would have been put out, it would have fallen flat on its face, it would have been a horrendous problem, and people wouldn't have spent another 40, 60 bucks on expansions for it, you know? But then the Kickstarter model is like, yeah, if you don't give us all your money, you might not get any of the stuff. You might only get the stuff, you know, you might never be able to get the expansions for it. I hate this model. I hate it. There wasn't enough time to, you know, I mean, I can only imagine that those were even worse than the core game is, right? I mean, putting out 2 expansions when so many of the special rules and crap in this just don't work. This was just a big mistake from my point of view, but, you know, had I not bought it, I would be regretting not buying it, even if I read, you know, that it was a horrible problem and that it was just hideous and that it was worse than anything else he or anyone else has ever done, because I had to see it, you know. Sometimes you just got to stick your tongue in the light socket. This is not a victory point turn. It's a little bit lighter than the victory point turns are. And I ran through most of the barbarians. We had the Heruli knocked the Visigoths out of here. Let me just look through some of the others. Not much. The Angles shifted their way down. The Saxons and Jutes pushed themselves around to more valuable locations here without doing much fighting. The Lombards had an interesting turn, though. They took Cisalpine, which is important to them, and they actually also took Venice. They used up some events to do this, to get themselves extra cash, whatever, and put themselves in a pretty good position, beating the Ostrogoths down southward. Now, what's interesting about this is, of course, the Byzantines are going to be coming up from the heel, we're hoping. At least according to them. That puts me to the complexity of the Scots. I wanted to catch all the easy stuff, since this was not terribly easy, and I might forget, you know, what's going on. While I'm trying to deal with, hey, the Scots are trying to establish themselves, and I got to be careful because I got to keep some in Ireland because they'll never be able to make it back. Scots swept in, took this out without an interception being successful, then moved up here on the first campaign. they played this trap, which should have given them a fair chance of beating what was a pretty good force, actually. Gives them some extra firepower at the beginning, whatever. It crapped out, and they ended up getting beaten and flung back. And they want these areas, so kind of staying up there and, you know, preparing myself to be able to play out my next turn. I'm going to probably grab a couple of Irish territories. We'll figure out the calculation on that in terms of how I best optimize my victory points. Actually, I probably could have just left the horde here. That would have been good enough, and brought the extra unit with me, but fuck it. Whatever. So that's the end of the barbarians, and I'll just flip them over. And that puts us to our civilized nations. And I need a break to deal with that. I'm also finding some of the older kingdoms, in fact, the entire pile of the age 12 kingdoms, have almost nothing they can do. Persia, who used to be so mighty in terms of options, etc., well, I should turn this upside down. Ooh, I didn't do a siege there. Yeah, I succeeded, excellent. You know, moved up east to try to take another city, get some more economic capabilities. Britannia shifted their forces around for their victory points. Others had no pieces whatsoever, because remember, these things are just, you know, administrative pains in the ass, nothing more than that, and clutter on the board. They're not really doing anything, and they're just generating negative victory points and failing to, you know, have much impact on the game, except that you cannot get rid of them, so you cannot gain full control of areas as, you know, the dominant power, which I find highly disturbing. Yeah. They're a little tougher. They're punching their way down. They have some victory points in southern Gaul now that are more important than anything else. Because, of course, they want to expand down there, but that means they more or less abandon their home areas in northern Gaul. And one thing is, we control northern Gaul, so and that's one of the things. So you can still get control of an area of a province that contains one of these messes. It's just you don't get the income from it, and you get the subjugation tribute or whatever paid to you. So it's not that unreasonable. It's just like it becomes this thing that's sort of not really yours, you know, and it's a weird feeling. You can't really defend it properly, as far as I can tell. So yeah, we had to push through some Burgundians, and I think I own Northern Gaul. Yeah, I do. But I don't have Southern Gaul, which is going to hurt me. I'm going to need that kind of money to survive. With 2 military victories, we had to make 2 checks to see if our king was assassinated. You know, such a pain. And that puts us to others who are also kind of interesting. We got the Ostrogoths and Burgundians up next, both of whom will be doing some stuff. The Ostrogoths, this is kind of a weird card. It has this in action, which says each of the nation's leaders who want to attack must first make a successful interception. Well, the leaders, except in the case of those countries that have, you know, named generals, are all already canceled out by this. But this is an event that's covered in the events. It might come up on a chit, it might come up on different cards. So, you know, reproducing all of the impacts of that event does make sense. And it also does cover, you know, like the Byzantines, who have 2 named non-emperor leaders in play. So yeah, I mean, it's not an inconsistency there. Of course, I forgot the penalties for their interceptions when they were facing the Lombards, which definitely make the Lombards' life more difficult. There was a fair chance that some of those wouldn't have happened. I've moved them. There's not much for them to do. And I don't know. You know, I don't know if I should be spread out or not. I own Italy, so creating stacks is kind of useful, but I'm also a little worried about just losing enough things in Italy that I no longer control it. In fact, I may have already lost enough things. I don't fucking know. Burgundians, they made an attempt to sack a city. It succeeded. In order to try and get enough money to not be automatically bankrupted next turn and thrown deeper into decline. We're already on the -5. Obviously, we don't want to be bankrupted, but it's pretty much a guaranteed situation. So our decline is there. We didn't get a big enough draw. We created a famine over in Asia, at least. And here's one of the things. Once you reach sort of this kind of arbitrary, oh, I conquered an area. That area becomes sort of inviolate, right? It's yours now. You can go, like the Vandals could go wander off out of North Africa, and I think they own Egypt actually, and out of Egypt, and basically abandon their back areas completely. Now, I'm not arguing one way or another whether or not you should have to garrison, you know, adequately controlled areas. What it really is, look, I could have a little kingdom up in northern Hispania, and I will never be able to ungarrison every space on it because Hispania is too big to control. The consequences of that don't really make sense to me. The idea that this is military forces, that an area might be reasonably under your control, say you've possessed it for a while, as opposed to frontier provinces in an area that, like, you completely control the area, but the frontier provinces were just captured or maybe just capitulated to you because you got control of the area. The feeling of what needs to be garrisoned and what doesn't just doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm a lot happier with games when they have a more uniform system that doesn't make sense than this sort of patchwork that's trying to be held together. But still, it adds detail and complexity, but it doesn't add any realism. It's still sort of not expressing the reality very well. We, as a subject nation, are able to move through Frankish territories, and although they have a capital up here, they're running down, trying to make their way down to Hispania. Unfortunately, they don't have a leader, so they can't actually make their way in there, which means they might, well, they're already a kingdom, so screw it. But all their victory points are down in Hispania, so they're kind of looking at, well, maybe I can spread out, control some stuff here, and maybe my capital can be lost or something without becoming a subject nation. Of course, we wouldn't lose our subject nation status, and we'd end up a subject nation of the Franks over in Spain, but whatever. The Gepetei turn was kind of interesting. They launched, first of all, they grabbed Sarmatia. Now they own it, and they're eligible to become an empire, actually. Whatever that means. They may not wish to, but they launched attacks into the Greek areas with the goal of getting even greater expansion. The problem is Belisarius was present down here, was able to intercept, and the Byzantines had a treachery card. There we go. Which, you know, their one defending unit, they were able to take half the attacking units away and apply them to their own. So they were able to actually win both battles. For the Byzantines, though, Belisarius was murdered. And that kind of foils their plans of like some kind of aggressive action going on in Italy that they really need to accomplish because of their victory points. The Gepidei don't have a leader available, so they're not getting any campaigns, and they're greatly reduced. So this did not work out well for them. I was hoping, I guess maybe for Belisarius not to intercept me, but that was pretty unlikely. Vandals are attempting massive expansion in all directions. They went up into Hispania, and they got foiled there because of an attrition card as they entered the Visigoth territory. They're greatly reduced, and they had to fall back. I can still do a campaign and pull these units in and be able to do something, though. Over here, I'm going to be trying to clear up some of the problems in Egypt so that I get the trade route there, get rid of those crappy things. I don't think they can submit, but it's hard to tell from the rules themselves. And then I'm launching an attack on the Byzantines, which was intercepted. I only have one leader, so this is the only place I'm going to get additional campaigns. Actually a point here. So a very tiny empire, like an empire that's been reduced to almost nothing, might have lots of leaders, and they can't really use them for much. I mean, they could just keep using the same units over and over again. Whereas a kingdom that grows into an empire that doesn't have historical leaders associated with it, or projected ones, I think in the case of the Western Romans, ends up in a weird position where they're like, if this thing is truly a dynamic and exciting empire, it would actually cause leaders to arise. And again, that's something that, like, well, why are we accounting only historical leaders? I mean, if we're going to propose this very, very different world, and we allow for, these sort of special sub-leaders and such not for Rome and Byzantium, why not the other kingdoms? What's going on here? And it's just kind of a, gosh, it doesn't feel like it projects outward the differences that would occur as you move forward. That's a problem that really is hard to address unless you start genericizing the game a great deal. And more than Britannia does, for example. Britannia gives you historical leaders, but that just means you have a single historical bonus dude around. But things like EU, the national leaders are limited, and conceivably you could be stripped down to a couple of territories, yet have all the leaders of France for the rest of the game. And it doesn't happen in EU. It does, it doesn't happen with France in EU, but it does kind of happen with countries that fail to get started, like Russia. All their historical leaders, well, you're like, yeah, but I can't build a navy and I got these fucking admirals, what the hell? If I moved correctly, I could prevent this thing's retreat, so I'm going to remove these from the game. If I didn't move correctly, I can never eliminate them because they will continually grow. So I'm just going to call those Blemenes or whatever goners at this point. And let's see, the Vandals failed here, driven back. With those failures, I decided to go after subjugating the Romans instead of the Visigoths. The Visigoths would be a much bigger prize, but going for the Romans instead, I would be able to. I'd have more of a chance. There's less force here, and I'd get something out of it. That my odds against these are less than half. However, I failed in my siege of the city. There was no successful intercept. So that's it for the Vandals. And so both the Gepidei and Vandals, who were sort of my prize pupils here, have not succeeded in fulfilling their expectations. Now, I gotta say, they both look healthy still, I think. But now I gotta move on. The Visigoths and then the poor Alani, who are stuck in Italy for some reason. Yeah, I realized I did things stupidly with the Visigoths. I should have done things like I did with the Gepidei, which is grab control of the area prior to launching attacks, but I'm launching an attack on the Romans here. I had enough pieces I could have spread out and taken everything and thus inherited cities, which may be okay. But the bigger point about that is that I'm going to have to spread out on my campaign turn. It might not be such a terrible thing because the Vandals have already gone. The Romans will be destroyed. There's basically the only people left are the Alani, and I'm hoping they won't get too deep into me. Ideally, I'd have a mobile, powerful force available to intercept already set up and not have to worry about trying to build a new one out of the remains. But I'm going to be gaining control of Hispania, and I just did it in the wrong order. And it's the kind of thing that, there's nothing in the game that makes this obvious. It's only through play that you start to see, oh, this is how you do it. And then, I got away with it with the Gepidae and with the Vandals. If I understand how the game's supposed to work again, which is a big if. And now I'm not thinking as clearly, and I forget it. It's just such a gamey, mechanical type little toy to do. And it's not the kind of thing that it's fun to discover. Oh, I can do this. It's more along the lines of, oh shit. Gosh, it would be nice if the rules kind of led you to this, so that among other things, you wouldn't have to try to figure it out on your own and see how do you play the game correctly. But on the other side, it's also well, gee, is this what they mean? Because it's kind of whacked. So the Alani burst through and captured and pillaged a Visigoth city here in southern Gaul. They were unable to take the subjugate Gallic Romans away. Those were actually Visigoth subjugatees in place there. So yeah, they've got both of these. And you can see Visigoths had to spread out a lot. The Alani wanted to get into Hispania. That's where their victory points are. And they've got another turn to try to do so. That puts me on the final one, the Byzantines. And we'll come back to them after I have dinner, whenever that is. But they're going to be kind of complicated because I've got multiple things to deal with here. I've got to cope with I wonder why this revolt was here, but there were still units there. I won't think about it. Maybe the revolt showed up on the units. But yeah, they're the last ones, and they've got to make some decisions as to what they're going to do, because I've got kind of foiled by the Gepidae there, which may be great for the Ostrogoths. Somehow, it's going to be a lot harder for me to get the troops into Italy because of that Gepidae attack. And maybe that was, the choice that I had. Do I want my victory points, or do I want to defend my income in Greece? And, well, I can't let things just attack me in almost any game. It's very hard for me to say, oh yeah, I'll just give up, my heartland. Because ideally, the Byzantines would not, They simply would not have done that. And that's, to me, it's a problem with the way the victory points are expressed. So yeah, I've got everybody done except for them. My friend did not like History of the World because it didn't place geographical limitations on where you could expand to, and likes the Britannia model better. For me, the Britannia model never made sense in terms of, oh yeah, I really want to be in York. It does later on, once you get out of the barbarian period. But here it's even worse. Here there's absolutely no reason one barbarian tribe wants to be in one place and one wants to be in another. And unlike in Britannia and most of its ilk, it actually becomes very, very difficult to get through to the places you want to get to. I mean, we've got, why do the Alani need to leave Italy? They look like they're just as happy in Italy as anybody would be. There has to be some other kind of mechanism to rule this. It does not make sense that they need to get to Spain. But on the other hand, if they decided we're going to be the ones who stick around in Italy, that's kind of unfair to anybody who is stuck behind them. So let's say the Visigoths decided, along with the Ostrogoths, to kind of stay in Italy and southern Gaul, using one of my pick your victory condition type elements. Well, you're not really seeing that pressure still that forces one nation further and further in. It's that constant pressure from the east that's driving the barbarians into all the underinhabited and underutilized lands. And, because of the way the empire is losing population, et cetera, throughout this period. So it doesn't, the game just does not reflect the reasons for these migrations in a way that gives you any insight. And it's at 25 years per turn, there's nothing in terms of military insight you're going to get from a game like this, right? So it's like, why go into the detail with the military? The story, and when I say insight, let's just call it the narrative, whatever. I mean, you're not getting much. You're getting some some kind of abstraction or approximation of something that may have happened during one campaign to represent the whole 25 years or something along those lines. It's not a reasonable trade-off to me to get that kind of simulation detail when the turns are so big. Something like Empires of the Middle Ages does a far better job, in my opinion. When I did my economic phase, I apparently fucked up. I don't know why. But also back when I wrote this thing up, which really surprises me, I did not have the Byzantines marked down as owning Mesopotamia, but they're sitting on 3 out of the 5 cities that I think make it up, but I can't be sure. But I'm assuming. And yeah, that's kind of disturbing. And you know what? I think I've been forgetting to give the Persians their $2 per turn for the off-board stuff too. Just seeing that. And there's probably infinitely many of these issues. Because here's the thing. When I start counting up the economy using the book, I'm no longer working from the particular player aids, and the player aids have the, here's a unique little source of income for the Persians type of shit in it, and who knows what else they have. I have been remembering to charge the Byzantines for their extreme age, which is a penalty that apparently only Rome and the Byzantines pay for. I don't know why. Again, it would be nice if things were kind of more generalized, but of course, that's just not the way this game works. Anyway, I've started making my movement into here and trying to figure out, hey, what do I need to grab over here? What are my victory point locations, etc.? And yeah, I don't know. But Narcissus is going to be able to get me over there, and then I can start making some shifts. Fortunately for the Byzantines, they were intercepted down here at Apulia and ended up being defeated. Retreat. They cannot retreat into here, or they can't retreat into here because the enemy intercepted them through that space. They can't retreat into here because it's an urban area as their finishing point, and then they can't go back up here at all. So they're actually destroyed, and that was a fairly nice army that just got wiped out because they're not allowed to retreat back onto the boats. So that kind of makes Narcissus' job a little bit harder. An interesting interplay happening over here with Persia. First of all, I thought I could submit them immediately. It wasn't that easy because, hey, they've got this vassal unit here that was owning a space, so they actually were 4 areas, and so a submission wouldn't work. So I launched an attack in Medea, took that from them, which was not represented on the board. But now they're submitted, and one of their units is over here, but they had the bonus of this martyrdom, which got them an additional unit and got them a pile of money for I don't know if that's Persia. Yeah, that might actually let them survive next turn without generating a lot of victory point penalties. Now I have Narcissus to take his campaigns. Now I still want to get my way into Italy, and that's kind of the problem here. I don't have a good landing anywhere, which fucking sucks. But I have a shot of hitting this if I want. I mean, I really do need to get myself established in Italy, and that's kind of the problem. So I think I'm going to take a shot at that, because my victory points will get killed if I don't go there. And I can bring Narcissus' entire stack over here and launch him across. Some of the other attack, but I sort of set up the battle before it was time to do so. I have to do the amphibious landing first. I failed on the first campaign. I'd get to take another shot. I fail again. So the Byzantines pretty much screwed their turn, other than taking Persia as a vassal, which isn't terribly helpful, but it gets me, it gets rid of one of my concerns over here. I'll be able to hold on to Mesopotamia and the Orient if I get it. Now, I won't have complete control, but I will for victory points of the Mesopotamia area, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, Narcissus is going to go back, and we'll figure out where his pieces are. Some of them, I think he had to end up in Macedonia so that he could have a whole stack and move 1, 2, 3. And the thing is, he can call the other units up to him. So he could move 4 through here and then move additional units in, but he wasn't able to land at all on either of his tries. That gets us to the end of turn 8. Turn 9 is a victory point turn. By the way, there was one other thing that, I don't know what these things are. There's like a question mark here. Oh, end of the game possibility, and then victory point turns. Okay. There was one other thing. I thought I didn't have one or whatever. This is the Heruli pillage marker. It had gotten into, or not, oh yeah, it is a pillage marker, but it had got into the looting pillage markers that you use to score points and whatever, and I drew it. I'm kind of like, what the fuck is this? You know, all the other ones are kind of different colored. That one is the same color and looks very similar. I can pull it out to show you. When I was just sorting my counters, boom, it went in there. It looks very similar to the, I don't know, these guys have kind of fire on them on this side, and you know, quick sorting. Okay, so that is it for turn 8. That means I can get away from this game for probably a couple of days while I play something else. And yeah, I mean, I am not looking forward to turn 9. It's going to be a victory point count phase, or turn where I have to do all kinds of number crunching and figuring out how to optimize things. But this was a major failure for the Byzantines not to get there. They're gonna get significantly damaged in terms of victory points. Of course, they're so far in advance. Let me get the scores and I'll show you. For the overall for this turn, the red player has lost 3 points. Remember, they've got the Britons, which cost them 18. Their other territories gave them decent. Green netted a total of 3 points. Okay, you know, that's in about the same range. Green is doing pretty piss poor across the board. Yellow got -7 points, less points than the red did, and they've been in general getting less points. The only exception was this one turn 6, where they scored an extra 30 or 40 points. which is a big score. And then blue has been doing pretty decently, to tell you the truth, but still way behind. This turn, though, they got a nice gain. They scored 19 points because the Goths both did pretty well, to tell you the truth. And so, you know, they're getting like a 20-point lead on the Byzantines off of this turn. Flip this up and then back everybody back down. And yeah, up this one goes. Maybe I'm playing by what the rules say. Maybe I'm certainly the way they're written is not what anybody in their right mind would have intended of a game. How much it's off is just the big question, and you know, I don't know. But let's send it up.